All right, so what is coming up in the class is always visible on our course outline. We're about a third of the way through the semester. So as we approach the midterm, we start multitasking a little bit. So today is the 24th of September, and we are working on Proving Ground 1. That's the main goal for today, using the lab time actively and effectively to work on fulfilling the requirements, the 3 rubric requirements of Proving Ground 1, and I'll be demonstrating that. We also, this is our first day to pick topics for our group presentations, so I'll be introducing that, but not on video. But you will find that in Unit 8. Those presentations will be given during class time during the midterm, which is October 20th for presentations, right? Then our midterm exam is on the 22nd. That's when questions of the day, numbers 1 through 3, that's like the hard deadline for those. The soft deadline is earlier. For instance, the soft deadline for question of the day 2, which we'll be discussing in class today, is today in Canvas, right? It was kind of introduced earlier. And what else is going on? Let's see. Once we're done with the Proving Ground, that's due next class, then we start one of our longest assignments, even though it's still only worth 3 points. It's our animation assignment. It's time-based media, and it's going to put all of our compositing knowledge kind of to the test, because not only are we going to organize pixels within layers, both pixels that we've already made and pixels we find and new pixels that we create, right? But we're going to be putting them in sequence just like a film strip so that we can play with the illusion of time passing through those images. And the only requirement of assignment 3, there's 2 requirements. One is that it shows a transformation over the course of the animation, even if it's a very short animation. And the second requirement is it has to feature something that you've previously created in the class. So you can make an animation with your creature, you can make an animation with your landscape, you can make an animation with your creature in your landscape, you can make an animation with your emoji, you can make an animation with your emoji in your landscape, you can make an animation of your line art jumble, you can make an animation of your emoji with your line art jumble. You get the idea. As long as you're using something as part of your animation that you've already created, that an asset that you've already created, that's going to meet that. And then you have to transform it somehow into something new. So we work on the animation project for a few class periods, very actively, because animation takes time. And then that's due October 8th. And then we get into our first vector assignment, right? So animation is our last raster-based project. It's kind of the end of fully focusing on compositing, and it introduces how we can build our own pixels if we want as part of the animation. But then we change gears into vectors. So those of you who have been waiting for vector imaging, we do kind of a logo design project around the midterm. But we also will have group presentations, we'll also have a midterm exam, and we will have printing for 3 pieces from the first half of the semester for the midterm gallery critique. So lots going on. And after the midterm, you'll also get your points put into Canvas for your engagement, you know, the point you get for being fully engaged in class each day. So with the 24th, with today, let's dig into Proving Ground number 1. So we already have a video that introduced it. This is Unit 6. I call it the Creaturescape, because we're simply putting a creature into a landscape. And the goals of the Proving Ground are not to create anything new per se, but are to understand 2 unrelated things and put them together believably, have the skills and the discipline to be able to do that. So I'm going to skip right to it under assignments and go to Proving Ground 1. And at the end of the directions for the assignment, you'll see the rubric, right? So these are the 3 requirements, but they're not in the order that we do them. That's just because this is not set by me. This is set by the badge accreditors for the Creative Problem Solving badge. So the first thing we need to do is placing a PNG creature onto a landscape background in a way that utilizes a common light direction so that the lighting matches both the creature and the background, and accommodates for the angle of our creature's anatomy. So it looks like the creature is in the right perspective or fits within the view of that background, even if it's flying, right? If its feet are touching the ground, that they feel like they're actually integrated into the landscape, that kind of thing. So it's the angle of their anatomy and then the lighting. And that might include drop shadows, it might include highlights, atmosphere, all these kinds of things. What does that look like? It looks like this, a creature integrated. It looks like this, these animated figures integrated into an unrelated environment, right? So how do they make these 2D animated creatures fit within a 3D photographic world? This is in the 1996 Space Jam movie. They do it by matching the angle of their anatomy, even though they're meant to look kind of like Looney Tunes, right? The angle of their anatomy, the placement of their feet matches perfectly with that ground plane, right? And the lighting. See the direction of the lighting that you have on Michael Jordan, the shadow and the reflection underneath Michael Jordan, the highlights on the top. All of this 2D animation is made to look 3D by having that light wrap around its top and have those drop shadows underneath it. The other thing we're trying to do is to not hide our creatures in the background, right? I say that here. It's not a Where's Waldo project. So your creature should take up at least 25% of your overall image. And if that requires you to crop down your landscape, so be it. Notice that there is no requirement here for you to use assignment 1 and assignment 2. That's just kind of best practice because it gives you an opportunity to improve assignment 1 and assignment 2. And so that's what I introduced it with. I'm going to open up my folder here, my Popeye, my Proving Ground 1, and open up that PSD. But the way I got there is I made a copy of my assignment 1 landscape PSD, renamed it, moved it, created a Proving Ground 1 folder, and then I brought into that assignment my assignment 2 PNG, which was this figure. See if I can find the remaining one here. Here it is. So these are all just smart objects of my creature. I'm going to mark them blue. These are what you call a hero asset because we're never going to rasterize this. We're going to make a duplicate of the one we want and then rasterize that. And in the last video I showed how any one of these placements could be made to make sense, right? I could have the creature be in the foreground, which I think is what the class kind of thought was best. I could have the creature be like a massive kind of kaiju coming out of the water in the middle ground, or I can even have the creature in the far middle ground, like verging on the background. The problem is the only creature that I could use of these three that would fill up 25% or more of the space would be this one. So how can you check that? You can use the crop tool, and you can just press up and then down to reveal what are called the third lines. And when you have the third lines, it divides your picture plane into 9 squares or 9 rectangles. Your creature needs to be in at least 3 of those rectangles. If it's only in 2 of those rectangles, it's only in 1 of those rectangles, it's not occupying enough space. So this character is occupying 4 of those 9, so that's plenty big enough. But let's move off of the crop tool. And let's see how many this is occupying. So now if I go to the crop tool, this is just for the third lines, click up with the arrow and down with the arrow, you can see that he's only occupying 1 of them. So how could I make that a composition where the creature is prominently featured, at least 25%? what I would do is I would crop it. I would use these crop lines to make a new composition where my creature is taking up at least 3 of those squares. And as you're doing that, you want to keep in mind the rules of kind of engaging composition, which is called the rule of thirds. It's actually why we have those third lines when you use the crop tool. So the rule of thirds means that when deciding on the parameters of a scene, it's especially pertinent in photography, right? When you're choosing the framing of shots. This is not considered a very good shot. Why not? Well, because you have the subject matter dead center, and it really kind of traps the eye in the middle. It doesn't get the eye to move around and take in the information. So what's a better shot according to the rule of thirds? You want to line up your subject matter with the intersection of those third lines. So this would be considered a better shot, a better framing of the scene. Does that make sense? So that's kind of getting into layout a little bit. Now, there is no pixel dimension requirement for the proving ground. There's only the requirement that you understand your pixel dimensions. You understand the physical dimension, and you understand what it's good for. So if I chose this to pursue, I would look at image size, and I would see that this is only 5 inches by 8 inches by 350. I'm going to uncheck resample so that the pixels don't change, and I'm going to see what physical size it would be at standard print resolution, which is 300. And at 300 pixels per inch, which is print resolution, this is 9.2 by 5.9 inches. And that does not meet the standard of print scale for us. We need it to be 8 by 10 or larger. Does that make sense? That doesn't mean we change this by saying resample and change it to 8 by 10 to make it print quality, because the pixels are just not there. If I forced it to be larger, the pixels would just blur out, right? Because the computer would have to invent a lot of pixels. So instead, once I see that this is not enough for 8 by 10, I would put in the next standard, which is screen resolution. That this would be for a screen presentation rather than for printing. And at screen resolution, those same pixels are 38 inches by 24 inches. Right? Plenty big enough for a big screen. Not a movie theater, but like a website for certain. So then that's going to be the second criteria of the rubric that we need. Once we have our composition, once we've made the creature fit into our environment, we've matched its anatomy, we've matched its lighting, then we need to accurately identify the pixels per inch and the physical format, right? We're going to do that by identifying how many physical inches it is at either screen resolution or at print resolution. And then we also, this is what trips a lot of students up, we also need to identify which of those two types our image is good for. So if it's at 72 pixels per inch, we need to identify that as screen resolution. And if it's at 300 pixels per inch, we have to identify it as print resolution. And it needs to be one of those two. And then we'll identify its physical size, its inches. So those are the first two requirements of the proving ground. The third is that we need to frame novel problems in familiar terms, and we're going to explain how our creature is intended to interact with its environment. How are we going to do that? We're not going to do that through presenting it and talking about it. We're just going to do that with a small bit of writing underneath our post. So you're going to write a few sentences showing us that you're thinking about how the creature would breathe, how the creature would eat, how the creature would hide from predators, that kind of thing. All right. What does this finished project look like? Remember, we always have past examples as part of the introduction to the assignment. It would look like this. This is identified as print resolution. It's 18 inches by 12.5 inches at 300 pixels per inch. That all checks out. And then it talks about how this woodland mist gremlin thrives in this environment rich in moisture and rotting timber, like in the northeast coast. of the Americas, northwest coast of the Americas.